This is the Straight to Video podcast. We're going to talk about two fights that, are rumored to be in the works, or people want to be in the works, or people want to see next, that probably are not going to happen next. And I'm going to go through why they're not going to happen next. And when they do happen, or if they do happen, what that would mean, or what that would need to happen for those things to happen. And if that's already confusing, that's how confusing boxing is when it comes to making fights, and why fights can't be made, and why they're not realistic, and why we spend our time talking about fights that are never going to be made, or if they are made, it's very obvious what needs to be done and no one wants to do it. That's just the way it goes in boxing. So let's talk about the first one, the biggest one. I think the one that everybody's been talking about for years. They've been talking about it for years, and they call it the biggest fight in boxing, the best fight you could possibly make. And it's the best fight you could possibly make. That's right. It's not the biggest fight in boxing. And if you did my the 5 fights that I predicted to happen in 2022, right? The biggest 5 fights that could happen in 2022 that I predicted, which are going to end up true, right? And already going down in that direction as far as Teofimo going to fight Cepeda to get to Josh Taylor this year. The main one, and that I said was going to happen, was Spence versus Crawford. And I do believe it's going to happen this year. What I'm here to discuss is what it's going to take to happen, and who deserves the most credit when it does happen. Because it's very clear to me who deserves the most credit when this fight actually happens. It's going to be Errol Spence. And as far as credit, I mean, who is going to have to take the least amount of money, right? Who's going to take the cut in their pay? Right? Who's going to make those sacrifices to make the biggest fight? Not the biggest fight, I'm sorry, the best fight in boxing. It's not the biggest fight. That's where this whole thing gets confusing, right? And where people don't understand. It's like, why can't it be made? It's the biggest fight in boxing. It's not the biggest fight in boxing. I'll be honest with you. It's not top 5 biggest fights in boxing. It isn't. Can that change? Not in a year again. Not at the end of the year yet. Maybe 2 years from now, right? If someone gets Crawford, say the PBC got Crawford, and they built him, and it takes time to build him. If you look at Gervonta Davis, right? Tank Davis, right? And we call him a star, right? We call him a star in boxing. And I think he is. He's not a superstar, but he's a star in boxing. If you look at him in his career, he has pay-per-views that do around 200K, right? And they said this one did a lot less. Maybe this one did about 150K. Who knows, right? But they go around 200K. That's what they do. And they call him a star in boxing. He's a star because he could carry a pay-per-view and it's profitable, right? If you could carry a pay-per-view and it's profitable to the promoter, then you are a star in boxing. Now, there's different levels of stars. He's nowhere near Canelo, right? He's less than what Spence is. When Spence's numbers are around 300K. 300 to 400K is what you're going to get with Errol Spence, depending on the opponent. Tank's around 200K. But Tank's been built as a pay-per-view star, right? They've been building him. And look, he's still around 200K. It takes time to get him to the 300K, to 400K, to 500K, which I think Tank could be if he keeps winning, and they keep putting the right opponents in there with him. He could be built to that, right? If they could find the star for him to, the big name for him to move up, like a Keith Thurman, like a fighter like that, along those lines, right? Like when Pacquiao beat De La Hoya, like when Floyd Mayweather beat De La Hoya. That kind of star to boost him up to that level of like 300 to 400K to 500K pay-per-views. It takes time though. It's not just done. And they've been working with Tank for a while. So they're not going to just do that with Errol Spence, with Terence Crawford, who's around 100K pay-per-view buys. They're not going to just do that overnight. I'm sorry. And people think that like, oh, he just got to be promoted correctly. It takes time. Gervonta Tank Davis is promoted correctly. It still takes time. So what's going to need to happen for this fight to take place is Errol Spence is going to have to decide that he cares about his legacy in this fight. That he decides that this fight is the most important fight, not to his bank account, but to his legacy in boxing. And once he makes that decision, he will take a cut in his pay to make this fight work. And he will deserve all the credit for this fight being made. Because Terence Crawford, he's reached the max he can make in boxing right now. He's reached the max he can make in boxing right now. He's already got paid that by Top Rank. He can't go above that. That's what the PBC guys are telling you. The guy that was on, I believe his name is Eric Smith, who's on the PBC podcast, or Tim Smith, I believe. Tim Smith said that, the financially doesn't make any sense, and they don't want to insult Terence Crawford with the offer. And what do they mean? Why are they going to insult him? Because he's already been paid the max that they can offer him. So what they offer him is either what he's been paid or less for this fight to be made. He's not going to be able to sacrifice any more funds, right? For a fight that he feels Well, it is correct. It should be his most challenging fight, right? It should be his biggest fight. Yes, it should be. So why would he get paid the same for his biggest fight? It's not going to be Errol Spence's biggest fight. I mean, yeah, it's not going to be Errol Spence's biggest fight. It's not. It's not going to be his biggest fight. It'll probably equal to, come somewhere equal to, slightly below his biggest fight. So he's going to have to take the cut and pay to make this fight. But I think Errol Spence is going to do that. I think Errol Spence is fighting 3 times this year to make that fight happen. I think Errol Spence is going to fight Ugas, which we know is happening. And then he's going to fight the winner of Butaev and Stanionis, who's on the undercard of his Ugas fight. And I don't know why people are not talking about that, because obviously Stanionis and Butaev, and Stanionis took the step-aside money and had the fight with Butaev as a final eliminator to get the shot at Errol Spence, because they realized that whoever wins that is getting a payday between each other, which is pretty decent. And then they're going to get their mega payday with Errol Spence. So that fight's definitely happening. So Spence is going to fight 3 times this year to make up for last year's loss in pay. And it's also going to make up for what he gives up when he fights Terence Crawford in a legacy fight. In a fight that isn't going to help the bank account. It's going to help their legacy. And this fight has to happen. I think that the fans, what fans do now in boxing, especially, is they talk financials, right? They talk about gates, they talk about pay-per-view buys, and all this, and it diminishes the sport, because no one, when they talk about football, right? No one talks about NFL on Monday, the games, and said like, oh, was that sold out? How much did they make a gate, right? What was the viewership like? No one talks about that. Journalists may, but not fans. They don't. All they care about the games. Who played well? Who sucked? Who's a contender to win the Super Bowl? That's all they talk about. But in boxing, we get mixed up in all these things that really are not that interesting. And we talk about fights that are not being made. This fight can be made. And if you want to talk about the financials and everything, let's give Errol Spence credit when it is made, because he's going to have to make the sacrifices to get this fight done. And I think he will, for legacy. Another fight that was talked about this week, being negotiated, and is being negotiated in the public, which is, as we've learned, right, over time, that isn't usually the best sign that a fight's going to be made. And that's Ryan Garcia versus Isaac Cruz. Isaac Cruz, who suddenly is a name because he gave Tank Davis a better fight than anyone thought he was going to. And people may have said that, oh, he's better than people realize, and that's a tough matchup. They didn't truly believe it. And I'm sorry. And when they say that the fight was so competitive and it could have went either way, that's them wanting to be right on what they said about Isaac Cruz. That's them wanting to be right. They are projecting. But Isaac Cruz and Ryan Garcia said that, Tank Davis is fighting C-level competition. And he's getting all this credit for fighting C-level competition. And Isaac Cruz, which led to back and forth, of course. And now it was talks of them fighting each other coming like March or April. And, there was rumors of the negotiation, and Ryan said he really wanted that fight as like a measuring stick fight for him and Tank Davis to show that, what he would do with a guy like Isaac Cruz. And people are saying, well, you call him a C-level fighter, now you want to fight him. Well, Ryan Garcia's other options besides Isaac Cruz, which is, rumors I've heard, right, are Francisco Vargas, right, which right now is a C-level fighter because he's washed, right? So Ryan Garcia has been honest with you, and he's been consistent with, if he thinks that Isaac Cruz is a C-level fighter, well, that makes sense because he's fighting a C-level fighter if he can't get Isaac Cruz. So he does think Isaac Cruz is a C-level fighter. Now, whether everyone else doesn't think he's a C-level fighter, he says that's on you. That's why it's the best fight to be made. Of the C-level fighters that I have of options, he's the most famous one. Doesn't that make sense, right? Like, I know people are saying, like, why do you want to fight as a C-level fighter? Because of you. That's why he wants to fight him. And every time you match up someone, right, and you're trying to find guys to build your fighter, that's been done forever. A measuring stick fight has always happened in boxing throughout history. You want to fight a guy, right? You're coming to fight the champ. You beat a guy that he beat more impressively. It builds the fight more. Then you're like, okay, well, this guy, why did he take so long with it? Exact same reason why David Haney fought Gamboa. So it gets to Twitter, right? And De La Hoya says, we offered him his biggest payday. And then, and De La Hoya shouldn't, of course, no one trusts De La Hoya. And he's earned that no one trusts him, right? The way Golden Boy handles these situations, it's usually leaves me with very little confidence in him. So everybody on Twitter like turns on them. They say, they didn't really want this fight. It's a publicity stunt. They're chasing for clout and all that. And then Cruz's manager could have just left it at that. He won without even saying anything. You know what I mean? Sometimes silence is golden, right? But he couldn't. He kept talking. And he goes and says that the B-side, Cruz, right, who before he fought Tank Davis, no one knew. After he fight Tank Davis, he's kind of known, is now requesting that Ryan Garcia cross the street to the PBC and fight on a pay-per-view the PBC runs. This is the B-side, right? And not just like a slight B-side. I'm talking about like B- side. Wants Ryan Garcia, the A-side, the clear A-side, the name, right, to cross the street and fight on the B-side promotions pay-per-view. Before that, Cruz's dad claims they want to get paid whether the fight happens or not. Now, okay, Ryan has pulled out of 2 fights in the past year. So now apparently that gives Ryan Garcia a rep that he pulls out of a lot of fights. Okay, I don't think that's fair, but I'm not going to argue that. But remember, the B-side, right? The biggest payday of Cruz's career, supposedly, if not equal to, biggest payday of his career, also wants to get paid a some amount of money, not just for his training. I've heard it's not just for his training, it's beyond that. If Ryan Garcia pulls out the fight, not for a replacement fight, but if Ryan Garcia just pulls out the fight, right? In the time of COVID, when fights get canceled left and right, as in next week, Joe Smith Jr. was going to fight Colin Johnson, and Colin Johnson has to pull out, right? Because of COVID, right? Which is spreading like wildfire right now. You want that deal with Ryan Garcia. Of course they laughed in your face. Of course that was a no-go. And I said that, as soon as I heard it, I said that was the stupidest term for a B-side to ever request. Canelo Alvarez couldn't even get a replacement fight. The first time they went to negotiations. Now, I don't know whether he got it after that fact. I don't know. I don't think anyone knows. People could say they know, whatever, because rumors, whatever. But he wanted to get paid the same he's going to get paid for Caleb Plant if they had to get a replacement and Caleb Plant couldn't go through with the fight. Everyone laughed. Everyone said that was the most ridiculous thing. But when Cruz wants not even just a replacement fighter, he wants to get paid no matter what, people think like, oh, that's reasonable. Stop. That's not reasonable. That is the B-side. He should just be happy he's going to get paid, that he has this option. Now, is this the biggest fight for Cruz? It is not. I'm going to be honest with you. It's not. The biggest fight is a rematch with Tank Davis. And I still think that's very possible. And maybe Cruz and them know that. So they're just using this to build their name a little bit with a little rivalry with Ryan Garcia. They can say like, oh, Ryan didn't really want to fight. Ryan was scared. And then go to the Tank Davis rematch. And I think that that's possible. But if that doesn't happen, this is the biggest fight. And it's not even close. Okay, who's he going to go fight? Michelle Rivera? On Showtime? Right? As the main event? That's a borderline undercard fight. Is that who he's going to fight? Is that who Cruz? Cruz does not have options, okay? He has a rematch with Tank Davis that Tank Davis will gladly take, I think. And I think that his promotion will gladly take. Because they know that they're a superior fighter. They know that fight wasn't really close. People wanted it to be close. Or he gets Ryan Garcia. Those are the 2 big options. He's in a beautiful spot. I'm going to say, for Cruz, I never imagined he'd be in this spot, how good it is right now. If he doesn't get the Tank fight, he squandered this fight. He should have did whatever he could to get this fight. Now, if he can't get this fight, promotional, whatever the thing, he should just say that. But this whole, oh, you come here and get the pay-per-view and all these things is nonsense. It really is. It's nonsense. You got to call it what it is. And truly, he doesn't want the fight. That's what it seems like to me. He truly does not want that fight. I hope that he has the Tank Davis rematch to him, because that's the biggest fight that he could get other than Ryan Garcia. And below that, it's just a drop-off. Humongous drop-off. I did want to talk about, and I'll end it here, right? I'm always going to end it with like a list or review or something that happened. I want to talk about Dazn dropped their schedule. And I think it's been mixed feelings, right? On, it's just been mixed reviews on this schedule. So I want to go through it fight by fight. I actually think it's all right. I think it's pretty good, pretty strong, actually. Is there star power to it? No, there's no star power besides, like Virgil Ortiz, right? Other than that, there's no star power. Is there mega fights in it? No, but there's some damn good fights in here. And let's go through it. The first one, February 5th, you have Jesse Vargas versus Liam Smith. Now, Liam Smith is never going to be the top level at 154, but he's a damn good fighter. He's right mid-level, right? Jesse Vargas, to me, is never going to be top level at 154 either, but he's damn mid-level. If you're coming up and you want to be a star and you want to prove yourself to the next level as far as competing for the title, these are two guys you would have to go through. And the fact that you're facing them together, right, only makes perfect sense. And we have to get past, like, okay, these guys can't fight for the titles. They're never going to be world champs, right? So I don't want to watch them fight. Why? That's mentality doesn't make any sense to me. This is an entertaining fight. This is a competitive, entertaining fight, and it's probably going to be action-packed. And you don't want to see it because you don't feel like any of these guys have a chance to beat the number one guy in that division. The UFC is built on guys that can't beat the number one guy in the division. Okay, that's just the honest truth. And most of the prospects you like, that you think coming up, can't beat the number one guy in the division. You just don't know that yet. And I don't think it's a good idea that we turn on fighters because they can't beat the number one guy. That's a good fight. That's an entertaining fight. I'd watch that every day of the week. I want more fights like this. The UFC just made Tai Tuivasa versus Derek Lewis. Derek Lewis has had 2 title shots, and he has failed miserably at both. Miserably. Didn't even look competitive, didn't even look close, didn't look like he belonged in there. The UFC will still main event him against one of their rising talents because he is entertaining. And entertainment still has to hold value. He's still good. He's not world championship level, but he's still a damn good fighter. And if you put him in there with another good fighter, there's a good chance that it's an entertaining fight. So people are down on that one. I don't understand that one. That's a good competitive fight. Next one, you have Daniel Jacobs versus John Ryder. And the fight that I don't think they're putting the storyline together what this is. Well, first of all, Canelo's rumored to fight Jamal Charlo, Cinco de Mayo. Now, I don't know what's going to happen. Jamal posted a picture with him and Caleb Plant matched up, so I don't know what's going to happen. But Canelo's days at 168 are limited. They're numbered. He's going to drop the belts. He's not going to fight John Ryder or Daniel Jacobs, or he's not going to fight really any of the mandatories coming up besides maybe Benavidez. So everyone should now be positioning themselves to get in line for one of these belts. And I think that Eddie Hearn knows this, right? Because, he is cool with Canelo. He does work with them off and on. I think that he's probably giving a heads up, like, what direction they're going to go. And so he's preparing 168, bringing John Ryder back, who tested 175, bring him back to 168 to fight Daniel Jacobs. Also, what is another move Matchroom is going to be making is that Andrade's going to drop the belt and probably move up to 168 as well. So now Matchroom is building a little stable at 168, a little, some competition, some interesting matchups, right? Some name power at 168. Are they going to fight Canelo? No. But are they going to be there for when the titles get freed? Most likely. And that's what I think that they're doing. And this, I think, is an interesting fight. It's John Ryder came up short against Colin Smith, who, was a damn good, close, competitive fight. Could argue he won. He outperforms what you think, because I didn't think much of John Ryder. When you watch him, it's not a lot of things you can say really glowing about him as far as what stands out, but he consistently wins. He has some consistent performances. You kind of know what you're going to get with him. And Daniel Jacobs has been shaky, and he probably lost to Rosado. Has really diminished since leaving his longtime trainer. Rumors he's going back with that trainer for this fight, trying a new weight class. I think it's an interesting fight. I think there's interesting storylines into it. I think it could be a very boring fight, an all-time boring fight, because when a fighter like Jacobs stops pulling the trigger, it's not like something you can really get back, especially with age. It's not really something like fighters get back. Okay, it's when they stop pulling the trigger, it's because their brain is telling their body to do something, and their body's not connecting, and it leads to not being able to take advantage of opportunities that they see because their body's not able to do it. So a lot of the times that doesn't come back. So we're gonna see. I'm probably gonna favor John Ryder in this fight, but I still think that's an interesting fight going into it, storyline wise, and what they're doing in 168, and especially if Andrade's coming up. Once again, not bad. Okay, this is the first bad one we're gonna get. This is Jaime Mangia versus Demetrius Ballard. And why it's so bad is because Ballard looks so terrible on the Mangia undercard that we just saw. He looked terrible. He looked awful. Okay, he's slow, stiff. And Mangia, who has been fighting kind of cans for a while and they gave him Rosado, who, you know, outperformed against Beck. So it made sense. That fight made sense. It was kind of like a semi-hyped up fight, had some buzz to it. And then they go to Ballard. It's a little bit like down, you know, it's not riding momentum. Now, if Mangia goes in there and knocks him out cold and now gets ready for Adames, that makes sense. But this is not a great fight. It's not a fight that's good. First of all, for fights to be, right, to create buzz in boxing, to do good for the sport, you have to have pre-fight buzz, okay? Having a good fight and then the buzz after, but there was no pre-fight buzz, it's good for the fight fans, but as far as building the sport or getting attention to the sport, that usually doesn't work because you have to have eyeballs to acknowledge what's happening, right? A lot of times, I think Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder, the first one, was a great fight, but I don't think it had as many eyeballs as they assumed it was going to have. And they thought that the buzz from that fight was going to carry on and really double the pay-per-views in the rematch, and they really put money behind it. It didn't, because there was no buzz for the first fight, and it was hard to build that off of just a great performance, and no one really saw it, right? So with Mangia and this fight, like, it could outperform. It could be a lot better, a lot more entertaining. Mangia could smoke him, or they could go to war, and Ballard hit, you know, has some pop to him, right? They could go back and forth and trade, but there's no pre-fight buzz, and to me, it just kind of diminishes the momentum Mangia had. So there you go. That's the first bad one. Lawrence Okoli versus Mikhail Chislak. I've never seen Chislak fight. Gotta be honest. Some of these guys that get on here and they'll go and they'll read like 10 of those guys' wins and losses and they'll say all the things. I've never seen a fight. Okay, at that weight division, unfortunately, there's two guys that people want to see fight. That's Bradis and Okoli. Everything other than that, it's just going to seem like a tune-up because no one's really ever seen these guys fight. No one's familiar with these names, especially in America. So, Lawrence Okoli's name is being built when he fights a guy that's not named Bradis, right? Is not a familiar name. People are going to be about it. I hear that this fighter is better than what his name value has, right? So, let's see. It could be an interesting fight. I think Okoli is special. I think Okoli... when I didn't think highly of him, and sometimes, you know, sometimes I miss on Okoli. I just was like, I'm not sure what he does that's fantastic. And then, you know, the range he could keep, he has upper body discipline. He never loses his upper body. For such a big guy and a tall guy, he also has some pop to his shots. He keeps the length. He jab you to death. He's disciplined. He's patient. He does a lot of good things. I want to see him fight Bradis. I think that's interesting. I want to see him go to heavyweight. I think that's extremely interesting with him at heavyweight, especially letting his body, like, he has a giant frame. He has a big back. I think he's going to gain the weight and enter heavyweight very comfortably. I want to see that. So, like I said, I don't think this is going to be like one that's going to be like a super attention grabber. Interesting because Lawrence Okoli is coming up. But, like, okay, that's two misses, I would say. Estrada Chocolatito. That is going to be Saturday, March 5th. There's nothing negative you can say about that. Now, is this going to have the attention of, you know, like those two giant superstars? No, they're not superstars. But you cannot complain when you have two best guys in the divisions fighting each other to settle who's the best guy at 115. No one could complain about that. First two fights were Fight of the Year contenders. If the first one was Fight of the Year. I'm sorry. First one wasn't Fight of the Year. Two great fights. Going to the third fight, which should be as entertaining as the previous two. Like I said, settles who's the best at 115. With storylines going into, you know, there's possible opponents at 115 that are still interesting. And the winner could actually move up to 118 and fight like a guy like Inoue or Donaire or Casemiro. So there's plenty of storylines at this fight. You can't complain when the two best guys in the division are fighting. Especially you're a boxing fan. Especially if you don't know them, fine. But if you're a boxing fan, you can't complain about two best guys in a division fighting to settle it. Then we go to Leigh Wood versus Michael Conlan. Leigh Wood had just an extremely impressive performance, right, versus Zucan. In a fight that he outperformed, he did a lot better than anyone thought. He added a little, stood a little more on his shots, looked more like a power puncher. Conlan, to me, has outperformed. He's gotten to a point, if he wins this fight, it'll be better than I ever thought he could have been, right? I always thought that Mike Conlan, who technically was pretty good, but nothing wowsy, has, not much power, is not the fastest guy in the world, just kind of disciplined, just kind of like a disciplined fighter. If he wins this fight and pulls off and wins a legitimate title at 126, I mean, it's impressive. I'm just gonna say it's an impressive performance. It's not really I just didn't see that for Conlan. I didn't see that for his career as ever really being like a threat to like a world title, but he's there. 126 is a messy division. You have probably the best guy in the weight division is Gary Russell, who doesn't fight often. Navarrete, which everybody assumes is really good. I assume he's a very good fighter, but hasn't fought anyone really to like make that claim and make that. I heard people saying that he's better than Gary Russell. He's the true champion of the division because he's active, I guess, but he hasn't fought really any of the names. And the names in this division, they got like Warrington, right, who just got slept by Mauricio Lara, fought him in the second time, gets out with a headbutt. They don't run that back. Now you got Lara in there. Who's he gonna fight? I don't know, even not even sure what promotion is he still with Matchroom? Is he a Golden Boy? I don't know who has him, right? Where's he going? What's next for him? So the division's in a mess, right? If it looks like Gary Russell could take control of it, how long is Gary Russell gonna be there though? Gary Russell might win his next fight and move up. There's talks of him and Tank Davis. I don't think that's reality, but there's talks of it, right? So this division, it needs some clearing up. It needs some of the guys to fight each other to kind of really get a full picture of what's going on here. These are two guys I think could be an interesting fight. This isn't a wow you fight or anything like that. No one's gonna be super hyped about this, but I think it's an interesting matchup. I think it's a competitive matchup, and I want to see what Conlan does at that level, right? Sometimes the guys is just outperforming, keep outperforming you, and then suddenly he's contending for one of the best guys in the division. This will put him at least in the conversation. We got Virgil Ortiz the next week after that. Virgil Ortiz, March 19th versus Michael McKinnison. I watched short clips of McKinnison. I wasn't 100% familiar with them. He's a boxer. He's going to look to keep the distance. He has like a little bit of a sideways style. Doesn't have much power to hold off Virgil Ortiz. I think Virgil Ortiz has fought two guys that were looking to, come for his chin. This is going to be a different opponent to look to box. Also a southpaw. I think Virgil Ortiz should look impressive in this performance, especially because the guy doesn't have what to hold him off. But I think people are going to be most impressed with Virgil Ortiz's leg movement. I think Virgil Ortiz is being built correctly and being built to really, they're not going to rush him, right? I think that he has this year to still get built, and next year, him and Boots will make their move for world titles to fight the best guys. And I think that we should be patient with them. Virgil Ortiz is not going to be in a boring fight. I think he's going to impress people with his legs in this fight. He's going to show, I think he's a lot more athletic than people give him credit for. I think he's a lot more tactical than people give him credit for. He's not just a pressure fighter. He's not just, go and slug it out type fighter. He's very skilled. He's very smart in the ring. And I think this is one of those fights that you're going to see. I think it's going to look like two different levels of fighters in this fight. I think it's still interesting. I think anytime you put Virgil Ortiz a name like that, it's pretty interesting. And this is the number 3 ranked guy for whatever the hell title they're competing for in this fight. This is a WBO international title. So this is number 1 versus number 3. Like I said, those rankings are kind of BS. Those titles are kind of BS. But either way, this is a guy that is, pretty decent level fighter. And then we ended with Kiko Martinez versus Josh Morton. Now, mind you, right, everything I just read to you was just for 2 months of fighting, right? 2 months of boxing schedule. That's pretty damn good. But, okay, Kiko Martinez versus Josh Warrington. Kiko Martinez with the upset victory over Galahad. In a fight that no one really expected him to win. And in this fight, people are saying, well, why would Josh Warrington get the title shot? Why wouldn't, I've heard people say, why didn't Laura get it? Why not Kiko fight, anyone else, right, than Warrington, who just coming off a knockout loss and, no contest. It's because Kiko Martinez got the belt. And what Kiko Martinez's real reward is for getting that belt isn't that belt. It's the payday he's going to get with Josh Warrington. Okay, that's honest. And you got to be, you got to respect that. And we got to be happy for Kiko to get that, get the payday. And it gets a guy that's still a little bit suspect if he, if his chin's all the way back from getting slept by Lara, right? It's of all the guys he could have fought, this is the biggest name and probably the most questionable one, right? The one that he could legitimately, if he touches, might be able to knock out cold and keep the run going. Now, I don't think this is the most exciting fight. I think in Europe, this probably has some buzz because Josh Warrington's a star in certain parts of Europe, is from my understanding. Like I said, Josh Warrington's kind of a name. I know him. Boxing fans know who Josh Warrington is. Kiko Martinez coming off a big, massive upset. Josh Warrington coming off a big, massive upset that he lost. It makes it a little bit interesting of a fight. I think Josh Warrington should win this fight. But let's see if the Kiko Martinez run could go. But for 2 months, I'm saying for 2 months of fighting, this is a pretty damn solid list. Okay? I want to see what Showtime's going to offer. I want to see what Top Rank's going to offer. I want to see what Fox is going to offer. I think that's pretty solid. I think that I think people want to be negative about Dazn. They want to be negative about Matchroom, about Eddie Hearn, and what they're doing. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. And I expect after this, you're going to have Ryan Garcia. I expect after this, you're going to have Anthony Joshua. Like, it's going to get better. This is just the first 2 months of them fighting. Remember, January, they couldn't do anything. This is just the first 2 months of them fighting of their schedule. I thought it's pretty damn good. Thank you for listening. This has been the Straight to Video podcast.